So guys, welcome to the day 2 for the Blind 75 series. Today we are going to look at a problem called longest substring without repeating characters. Now what this question says is that given a string S, find the length of the longest substring without any repeating characters. So essentially you will be given a string and you have to find out like the longest string which is possible in the basically the substring where the characters are not repeating. We have to be very careful with the words. It is saying longest substring and not longest subsequence. So it has shown few input and output as example. As you can see, like we have A, B, C, A, B, C, B, B. So the longest substring without any repeating characters is A, B, C. Similarly, if I go and the output is 3 because the length of ABC is 3. Similarly, if we go to the output 2, we have B, 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 and the output is 1 because obviously the longest substring without any repeating characters is just B. And then we have this output of P, W, W, K, E, W. So here we have two outputs basically. One is W, K, E and second is K, E, W. Both are having length 3 and they are non-repeating substrings. Now what it also marks, right, like notice that the answer must be substring PWKE is a subsequence. Why it is a subsequence? Because obviously W has been repeated twice. As you can see here, W has been repeated twice and therefore PWKE is a subsequence, not a substring. Again, the constraints which are given here as length of the string is greater than 0 or less than equal to 5 into 10 to the power 4. This basically means that you have to solve this problem either in O of n time complexity or O of n log n time complexity. Secondly, maybe it can go to O of n square also, but that we'll see while trying to solve this problem. Then we also see that S consists of English letters, digits, symbols and spaces. So it can have anything, like it's not restricted to only letters or alphanumeric characters. Okay, so this is the question. Before solving the question, we will be discussing about the approach, how to solve it, and I'm going to walk you through the solution. So yeah, let's start with that approach. Okay guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss the solution approach of the problem which we have seen on Leet Code. It's our day 2 of Blind 75 series and we are solving the problem longest length of longest non-repeating substring within a given string, right? So I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to discuss the solution approach and then we are going to code it together, right? So I have an input string, right, which is given to me as A, B, C, B, C, A and then B, B, right? So this is my input string, correct? Now what do we need to solve this problem, right? What are the things we need, right? Obviously we need a mechanism, right, to track frequency of characters, right, which in the string. What we do for that is we maintain a list, right, of zeros into 255, right? So there are 255 ASCII characters, right? And this list maintains, so the value, let's say A, right? A is represented by 97. So A of 97 is actually going to store the frequency of A in the current substring, right? So this is the mechanism how we are maintaining the frequency of the substring. Second thing what we need is, so to solve this problem we are going to follow a two-pointer approach, right? And we need two variables called L and R which are going to track the left starting point of the string and the right ending part of the substring, not string, the substring, right? So these are the two variables which will be required, right? The third thing we require is a max length variable, right, which is going to track the maximum length, right? And at any given iteration or at any given point, the length of the string can be calculated as R minus L plus 1, right? This is the broad things which we require to solve this problem. So now we are going to write the pseudo code to solve this problem. Okay. Okay, so let's write the pseudocode and the approach to solve this problem. So as I have mentioned above, I have the string of A, B, C, B, C, A, B and B, right? I have this index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Initially what I will do is I will put this left pointer equal to right pointer equal to 0. So which means that the left pointer uh, is pointing to 0 and the right pointer is also pointing to 0, right? And what I will do, I will put this complete thing inside a while loop. So inside this while loop, let me just shift for space purposes. So initially this while loop is going to run when the value of right is less than or equal to length of s, right? Basically the ending of the string reaches to the end of the ending of the substring reaches to the end of the string, right? So when I will encounter this situation like left equal to right equal to 0, the first thing, like before doing anything, we are going to maintain a variable called le. So in le we are going to store the element which is occurring at the end of the substring, which is r, right? So I am storing in this le the element which is occurring at the end of the substring or at the end of the current substring, right? Next thing what I am going to do is I am going to check. What I am going to check? If frequency of odd of le, this odd function in Python returns the ASCII representation for any character, this is greater than 0, which means I am checking whether this element has been encountered already or not. So for the first scenario, for this scenario which we have right now, L equal to R equal to 0, this element has not been encountered. So this condition evaluates to false. So what we do, we move to the else part of this thing, of this if condition. What I'm going to do in the else part is, basically the first thing I'm going to do is, since I have encountered this element, I need to increment or I need to mark this as already occurred and increment the frequency in the frequency list by 1, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say frequency of odd of le, right? I'm going to say plus equal to 1. This is the first thing which we are going to do. Second thing is we are going to calculate the current length, right? I'm going to call this as current length. And the current length of the substring, right, of the substring which is formed of non-repeating characters, in this scenario exactly 1, which is a. So what we are going to do is we are going to do r minus l plus 1, which is 0 minus 0 plus 1, which will equal to 1. So length has, so the length variable has l, right? The next thing what we are going to do is, now we have calculated the length, we are going to so initial value of this max length was 0. So now we are going to do a max length is equal to max of len comma max length, right? So what we are doing is we are updating the value of max length based on the current length. The current length is greater than the max length, then the max length will be assigned the current length, right? The last thing what we are going to do is we are going to move this right pointer to one step right. So r plus equal to 1. This is my first iteration. My first iteration is complete, and the length of the longest substring with non-repeating characters which I found in the first iteration is 1, which is equal to a, right? Now I'll move this thing to, now I have incremented this r, right, by 1. Now r points to 2. Now since r points to, r points to 1. Now since r is now pointing to 1, again we come here and the le has b. So this le is having b, and again we check if, so I'll also maintain a record here that frec of a is marked as 1. Now when I encounter b here, again b is not present in frec, or frec of b is 0, so I will mark the frec of b as 1 in this statement. then again I'm going to calculate the fresh length, which will be 1 minus 0 plus 1, which will be 2, right? So max length, right, will now have 2, correct? Again, now I have moved the value of r by plus 1. Now r is pointing to 2, right? The moment r is pointing to 2, again this frec of c is also like not greater than 0. So again this condition evaluates to false, right? And then again we go here and we mark this frec of c as 1, right? And I mark, and the value of max length again will become 2 minus 0 plus 1 equal to 3. So now the maximum length of the substring with non-repeating characters till now is 3, which makes logically sense also, which is A, B and C, right? So this was pretty straightforward. This is a scenario till which we are not encountering the repeated characters. The tricky part comes where we actually encounter the repeating characters, right? So what we have to do in that scenario, right? Let's have a walkthrough and let's see what happens, right? So now R has become 3, right? R has become 3, and when we check here that frec of b is greater than 0, yes, and this condition evaluates to true. Now what we need to do, see, now that we have encountered a repeating characters, we have to logically think that after A, B, C, what is the next string with non-repeating characters? It doesn't need to be having a maximum length, but it needs to be a non-repeating character substring, right? So if I logically see, after ABC, the next string which I have got is C comma B, right? So C, B. Now this is my next substring. Obviously this length is 3 and this length is 2, but logically speaking, this is the next substring with non-repeating characters. Now if you see, how have we got this string, right? So if I want to get this string, what I need to do is my length variable, or sorry, not length, the left variable. The left variable should have 2 and the right variable should have 3, right? So if the left is having 2, if left is pointing to 2 and right is pointing to 3, then I will have this logical CB as the next substring with non-repeating characters, right? And I can update the length and max length later, right? So what you're saying is we basically need to move the length variable from 0 to basically 2. Or rather, what I can say is I need to move the length variable to the index, right, plus 1 of the character which has already repeated, right, which has already occurred. In our case, that's B, right? So we need to move the character, we need to move the left pointer to one step ahead of the variable which has already occurred, right? How are we going to do that? So remember, in the R we have 3, so the current element has B, right? And we are in the if clause now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to essentially write a while loop here. What this while loop is going to do is, what we are going to say is while frec of odd of LE, right? This is not equal to 0. We need to make it to 0, right? Then only we can start, right? Now, while this is the case, what we do is we first store a current element, right? Or current start, or I will call it current element, and in that I will store S of left, right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this odd of current element, right? I'm going to mark it as 0. Why I'm doing this is basically when my L reaches C, I need to have my frequency element reset, because now I want to calculate the length of the new substring, new fresh substring which I am having here, right? If the value it is already present, for example, in our case A is already present, and if we don't mark A as already occurred as 0, then when we will encounter A here again, and we'll see that we have not marked it to 0 previously and it has a value greater than 1. This will mess up our whole algorithm, right? The last thing which we need to do is I need to move length by 1. So L plus equal to 1. Now when L plus equal to 1 happens, in this current iteration, L moves to B, right? The moment L moves to B, we have to understand that frec of A has already become 0 because here we have marked this frec of A as 0, right? Then now length has become 1 and I see that this condition again evaluates to true because B is having a value greater than 0, right? So we enter here, we have this while loop here. In this while loop, this condition is not still evaluated to true. Now this condition still has not evaluated to. So what we do is we get in this current element as B, and what we do is we set the value of this B, right, to 0. So again this becomes 0. Now I again come here and I see, right, like this condition frec of B is not equal to 0. Right, this condition now evaluates to false. This condition now evaluates to false, or our loop stops. And when our loop stops, the L is having 2 as the variable and the R is having 3. Right, R is still pointing to 3. And then I start again from here and I come here and I check, right, and I check if R, which is of B, if B is present in the frec, still it is not present, and I move to the bottom, the else part, right? And then again what I do is frec of odd of L is 1. What I do is I increment the value of B and then again this B becomes 1. The moment this B becomes 1, then we calculate the length. The length will be R. R is what? R is currently pointing to 3 and L is currently pointing to 3 minus 1 plus 1, which becomes 2. So the current length of string becomes 2, which is logical also, which is CB. So our current length is CB and we got the next length as CB, right, which is 2. Then we do a max length. So max length is 2, 3 because we already have 3 here and the max length remains as 3. Now this step is repeated across the string to get the substring which is having the maximum length of the string, of the substring, right? So let's code this out and check whether this approach works or not. Okay, so guys, now is the time to code this problem out. I am going to write the code. We have already discussed the approach previously, so I'm just going to start and writing this code up front, right? So I have an input string, I'll call it as str, right? And what this solution method is going to return is basically an integer, right? Now, what do we discuss in the approach, right? So I'm going to maintain a variable called L and a variable called R, and these two are being initialized to 0. So these are essentially the left and the right pointers, right? I also need a frequency array, which we are going to use to store the frequency of the characters, right? I'll also be needing a max length element or a max length variable, which is going to store the maximum length of the substring up till now, correct? Now what I'm going to do is we are going to run this loop while R is less than length of S, right? As we have discussed in the solution approach, while the end of the current substring reaches the end of the string, we are going to run the loop till that, right? And we are going to have a variable called LE, and in LE I am going to store the end of the current substring, right? I'm going to store the end of the current substring. So that will be basically S of R, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a check. What I'm going to check, if this LE has already occurred in the string or occurred in the substring or not. For that, what I can do is I can write frec of odd of LE. If this value is greater than 0, which means it has already occurred. So I'm going to do a pass here. We'll code this out later. Else we are going to do a pass, right? So we have defined two scenarios where the element has maybe already occurred and the element has already not occurred, right? So I'm going to code out when the element has not occurred for now, right? So as we have discussed previously, what we need to do is, first thing is we will mark this frec of odd of LE plus equal to 1. Basically mark the frequency that it has already occurred. Second thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the current length, right? And the current length will be, as we have discussed, R minus L plus 1, right? And we are going to assign this current length, or we are going to compare and assign this as max length of the max length as max of current length comma max length, right? This is what we do right now. One more thing, the last thing which we have to do, we have to move this right pointer by 1, right? So this is what we are going to do in the else part. Now we come to the if part. What we are going to do inside the if part. So inside the if part, I am going to write this while frec of odd of, or rather I'll take a current element, I'll call this as current element, and this will be the starting of the substring, or rather I could say, yeah, starting of the substring, starting of the left. So S at L, and what I'm going to check here is if this current LE, or not rather current LE, while LE, right, odd of LE is not equal to 0, then I'll come inside this, right? Then I'm going to come inside this, and I'm going to mark this current LE frequency as 0, right? So current LE is equal to 0. So this is what I'm doing. I'm resetting the values of the characters in the substring which have already occurred. I'm resetting them to 0 so that we can use the same frequency array in the next iteration when we basically move, right? The next thing what we have to do is we have to push the value of left L plus equal to 1, right? So we are moving the L value by 1 step ahead, right? Okay, so this is what we are doing. The actually one more thing is that this current LE, it needs to be inside the while loop. It should not go outside the while loop, because what we are doing, right, we will be moving this value of current LE 1 by 1. So this should come inside the while loop, right? So this while loop, so the current LE is here. Then what we do, we mark this current LE as 0. Basically we are resetting the frequency value of the character which has already occurred, and then we move this left pointer by 1, right? So this is what the code looks like. In the end, we have to return the max length, right? So this is what the code will look like. I am going to quickly write the test cases using the unit test case module. So import unit test case, and what I will do, I just write here a class test, longest repeating this one substring, and this is going to extend the class unit test dot test case, and I'm going to define the test case 1 underscore 1 is this one. I'm going to have a substring, so I just copy the substring from here and I'm going to paste it here, right? And I'm going to create this obj variable which will be having the class this longest substring, and I'm going to run this obj dot solution s, right? And I'm going to assert it, so self dot assert equal. So this will return a 3 value. It should return 3 because the length of longest substring is 3, right? So this is going to return 3. Let's run this and check this out. So as you can see, this test case has passed, which means this obj solution has returned 3. Let's quickly duplicate this and just run the remaining 2 test cases, and then we are going to submit this problem on Leet Code, right? I'll just rename this to 2 and I'll rename this to 3. Let me just copy this B here, B, and let me just copy this PWWKEW here, right? Now here the answer should be 1 and here the answer should be 3. Let's run this and check this out. So this is also passed, so we are getting the correct result here, and this is also passed, so we are getting the correct result here also. So as you can see, like this is the solution to this problem, right? Now what we are going to do is we are going to submit the solution on Leet Code and check what is the how is the performance of this solution. So guys, we are now going to run this solution on Leet Code and check whether it works or works fine or not. So I'll copy this, I'll go to Leet Code and I'll paste this here, right? And then I'll submit this code, right? So let's see. So as you can see, the test cases have passed, right? And all test cases have been accepted. Okay, so this is the solution, right guys? Tune in for more for tomorrow with problem number 3.